What's up, Star Wars Unlimited fans? It's Loopy here at Late Night Gaming, and we are here for the first remastered class on Sabine ECL. And we got two proud members of Green Bean Nation, Chrono and Will. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, but don't call her Green Bean. I don't like that.
Don't like that. All right.
No. Sabine Green.
And it's actually
we can call it whatever.
So
we can call it whatever we want as one of them wins.
That's right. And what did you win with? What did you win with Sabine? Will first.
I took down the Richmond Sector.
Yeah, and
it was at the time the largest Star Wars tournament. It's since gotten beaten, but we'll have to get that again.
Yeah, well, you got Galactics coming right up, and then Chrono. You followed that up in Minnesota. How'd that go up for you?
Yeah, pretty good. Made it through the top 8 with 4 of my teammates. I did lose that match though, real close one. But yeah, it's good showing. I think that one was the highest competitors, right? Eked it out maybe a little bit from Richmond. But yeah, I think you're right. Worlds has already got what, almost 3,000 people. So I think we're about to get a real test coming up. Yeah, it's wild.
It is wild, and that's cool. And how long have you been actually working on this deck, Chrono?
Since I think the cards weren't even fully spoiled. I think we switched to Sabine Green when Rebel Assault was spoiled.
Right.
For pre-set 1 release, and that's when we were using Steadfast Battalion, all the fun stuff.
And I remember that happening because I think Sabine was typically on yellow immediately before that. And then I think I saw Mike playing this first, before you, and I asked him about it, and he gave you the credit for cracking the deck, in the first place. And there's a very active thread on KTOD for Green Sabine, which has been, a great help to all kinds of people. And are you in there too, Will?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
that's where I got my sea legs, so to speak. I built on what those guys did, from the start, and stuck with it since one too.
And myself, my wife, and my son are all grateful, for that too. I mean, we've been playing that, and we're maybe a couple of cards off, your list of times, but mostly very, very similar, as you know. So great deck. It's arguably the best deck, it has been for quite some time. So
I think there is an argument that it, like, if you were going to go by consistent decks, like through every set and viability on a competitive level, it's definitely up there.
Yeah. And I called it all through the last set. I think now too. I mean, other than Django, which became the undisputed best deck for a spell there because it was so good it was broken. But the thing is that all the rest of the decks are tuned to Sabine. Like, the reason Tarkin Town is good is primarily that it's good against Sabine. I mean, and I'm saying that as somebody that does a lot of Quinlan. So, I mean, anytime something else becomes the best deck, Sabine tends to crawl from the grave. As our lovely art is there, because as soon as you're targeting something else, the decks are targeting like a space deck or something, all of a sudden Sabine is just, plowing again because they're not tuned to her.
Yeah.
So
that's one thing I've noticed playing the deck is that it seems like no matter what my opponent's playing, they've prepared for Sabine, whereas as the Sabine player, you can't prepare for everything. So all the home brews, like, they're built to beat Sabine. Everybody is building with Sabine in mind. So that it's a hurdle.
And it's been since set 1, actually, that we did a masterclass. I did a video after Poland Wrecker released that, I mean, I got a lot of traction right after Gen Con, but I'm very glad. The first masterclass, if you check that out, had Tatta, and he really did some, great things. But he was playing Chrono's deck, is how that worked, as Tatta tends to do. But we're trying to mainly, make you better at Sabine. So we'll talk about kind of the changes here. We'll talk about a couple of cards, and then we're just going to buzz through the matchups. This should be significantly shorter than our typical master classes. But tell me about your list, Will. This is actually what you ran at Richmond.
So for Richmond specifically, I mean, I think Sabine's about a 70 card deck, and then depending on what meta you decide you're going to face, you want to tune your 60 out of 70 to be those cards. This is the I'm Scared of Quinlan version of Sabine. Metal Ceremonies and Sundari are definitely highlights of that, because you want the extra X5s. And I really like Metal Ceremony in that matchup just because you have the ability to discard it to Force Throw, have no effect. Discard it to Ahsoka, have no effect. And sometimes just throw counters on and start racing with essentially a 0 resource sword or pilot or whatever upgrade you want to call it.
Yeah.
Besides that, there's not too much that deviates from the standard. Wing leaders are a little bit of a flex slot. And I think the one thing that set me apart from a bunch of people was I was only on 2 Darksaber as opposed to 3, which a lot of people want to be on. That was just more to focus on having more options in the deck and not necessarily always relying on that plan being the number 1 option.
That's a good point. Do you think Darksaber should be the number 1 option playing Sabine?
I think there's just too many matchups where if you draw it, you're probably going to be thinking about it as a real consideration. But there's a lot of matchups where they're prepared for it, even game 1. In my Richmond tournament, you'll see the Quinlan player that I played in the finals had main deck answers. Alex had main deck answers. And a match that wasn't on camera, I played against Cad Red, who also had main deck answers. So it's an easy opportunity to get yourself 2 for 1, and sometimes you just want to not give them the opportunity because you have other cards that are better out.
It absolutely wins games, and if they don't answer it immediately, it's going to win the game. But I mean, I think really good Sabine players will think about, am I going to win this without the Darksaber? Because if you're going to already win it without the Darksaber, why take the risk? Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I love how you brought that up, Lou, because I think that's like the thing about Darksaber is it's not just, hey, is this my best play on my flip turn? Because if they're not going to answer it, most of the time it is. But to Will's point, a lot of decks have the ability to answer it. But also there are those games where it's just like, I cannot physically win this game without this card. Right? Like there are some games, some draws, like sometimes you just have to put your pedal to the metal, put your foot on the gas, and just go. But it does not happen all the time, for sure.
And great stuff. Great list. I see fighters coming back, and that's something that's happening set for, the resurgence of that. What matchup are you thinking of that as you tech this, Will?
Kira. Mostly Kira. Also, any of the hero blue decks, Village Protector decks. Those are incredibly important cards. The Saboteur to get rid of the Shield and Sentinel at the same time is just very good. I find myself ECL and fighters quite often, or timely in fighters on the flip turn quite often.
And also sneaky.
It's a very powerful card.
Right. Sometimes the last damage is playing fighters and then anything red. Right.
Yeah, I actually, with a slightly different list, when I was still playing Daring Raids, I had a game that put me into top 8 of a PQ because I went fighters, Daring Raid your face for 4, 5 total damage without beating an attack or anything like that.
I've done it
that
on
put me over.
Just a blank heroic sack, right? A heroic sack that didn't do anything other than
draw a
card.
Yep.
It will do the 100% damage with the fighters. Great stuff. All right, Chrono, this is your tweaked list for Minnesota. Clean list.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of things changed between the 2 tournaments, right? We saw, obviously, Will's right. Quinlan was kind of the boogeyman. We thought anyway that, and maybe Cad was going to kind of jump in. We're going to see a lot of that. What ended up happening really is just a lot of Kira, and then Ray Data Vault started taking up. So like we saw a lot of that, and then the Vader 4, right? Those were a lot of the innovations that the meta made. And so when I was looking to build the deck, a couple big things. One, I ended up moving Chewie to the sideboard from the main deck. Really, that's just Chewie is very powerful when not answered, but if they have the answer, just like Darksaber, it sets you up for a 2 for 1, so it's can be extremely risky, and a lot of decks are ready for it. We also found in our testing that even into like Kira, for instance, piloting it early, even that was hard to win the game because yes, you get some free swings a couple turns, but it still dies to OB on the R5 turn, and then you actually didn't play an additional unit. So it actually hurts your math in the long run. It is good to slam later in the game, but it really isn't that, oh, it automatically wins card like we thought it was early in the set.
Right.
Other than that, really the only other thing I had Fighters of Freedom in the main instead of Sundari. That's just because we saw a lot more village people and expected a lot more coming up. Sundari is obviously better into Quinlan, and it's better into some racing situations, but worse into those decks. And then I wanted the full package of wing leaders. Ultimately, one of the big shifts that happened was all the Data Vault decks, and a lot of them had trouble dealing with wing leader, right? Han 2 is a big one. We saw that deck really take off. They struggle immensely into that card. Way less waylay decks, so might as well lean into it.
And it's also a very good card in Villain Blue, which Kira has. I mean, right? Because I mean, if you A-Wing Leader is a very good thing. You mix the power of the dark side, just hit the 2/1, and you've done 10 damage to Kira, which you're going to be able to continue that going forward. So,
Yep.
I have seen that cut entirely at times, which seems a stretch. All right,
Yeah, I can see going down to 2 in certain metas.
I think the only reason to cut it is when you're worried about waylay. If there's a rise in waylay decks, if there's a rise in bamboozle main decks, Wing Leader looks real silly against a deck that's playing bamboozle.
Do you often side out Wing Leader for yellow?
For yellow, yes. Against basically, if somebody's bringing in bamboozle already for my dark saber, I'm not going to give them free value.
All right, so let's talk about the base choice. I mean, this is the base that's like sweeping the nation, and it's interesting to me because a lot of card games, I think this card would be trash, and I know some very, very good Magic players that would say how bad of an idea this is. It seems to work in Star Wars. There is the winner of the
Orion took off, right?
Yep. So, what are your guys' thoughts on Data Vault? After Leal, did you test it all with it, and what was your observations on that versus ECL?
Yeah, I tested it. So the biggest advantage of Data Vault, right, and you're comparing it to even the 30 or the 25 HP bases, is it and this is really hard to quantify, but it allows you to prevent check, right? And what I mean by check is those turns where you have to claim or you have to make a specific action to prevent lethal damage. Having the extra threshold allows you to play different lines, which can ultimately increase your win percentage into certain matchups. The issue is you end up removing one of the biggest skill expressions in our deck, which is ECL, which is the way that you can get around and navigate and interact with your opponent. Pretty much really one of our only forms of interaction we have ultimately is ECL. And so taking that away, yes, you can play more control. You could add more cards that allow you to do that in the Data Vault strategy, but it becomes much more challenging into some of the meta.
Any thoughts on Data Vault, Will?
It's never been something that really appealed to me. I tested the deck after it won low just because it was so interesting to me. But at the same time, it didn't play the Sabine game the way I wanted to play it. I felt like that Sabine Data Vault deck would almost be better off served with just a different red hero leader.
Right.
It's just too much of a different deck to me, and too far from what Sabine wants to be doing.
Yeah, and I think, had you played them against each other with one person on Data Vault and one person on ECL?
Yeah,
I played
Justice a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Did it feel like ECL was significantly favored?
Yeah, and it's not just because ECL. That's one of the interesting pieces. The deck that was running Data Vault could be tweaked to fix that, right? Wing Leader is a big card, and we'll talk about it when we get up to the matchups. But like the Lealist, a couple others weren't playing some of the more early upgrades that are necessary in the mirror, and they don't have ECL, so it's kind of a double whammy. There is a strategy, and I before we see it in the comments, yes, in Data Vault, you keep your timely reinforcements in hands, or so you can do it, right? You keep your timelies there. Like, yes, there's strategies so you can still get that advantage, but it is always going to be a turn later, right? And yes, you have the threshold of the life, but like sometimes it's the actual swing that happens in that turn versus the actual life points you're losing. So,
and I think timely.
Yeah, it seems like.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, it seems like these green-red hero decks really don't interact with each other, so it kind of comes down to a sword fight. And you have swords and they don't. Whether it's Wing Leader, whether it's Pilots, whether it's actual Dark Saber, they don't have that. They just are relying on playing bigger units later. So.
And Sabine ECL can play timely from hand too. Like the timely Wing Leader on the flip turn, is kind of a safer but similar thing to a dark saber. I mean, the timely
Yep.
Sabine's Masterpiece is great now. You know, a lot of times there, and then that lets you keep the wrecker right on 6 rather than having to go to 7 on it. Or, I mean, if it's smuggled to 8, which is probably longer than the game goes. And I certainly saw you do that, Will, when I was announcing you. You had some excellent use of timely.
Oh, yeah.
And showed some of the things in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the new stuff. Luke, what are your thoughts on Luke as we went into the set for meta?
He's a green.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay,
I guess my biggest thing is just I want to play as many swords as possible, and Luke's just also a sword sometimes, and also sometimes just a green unit that I get to play for Sabine's Masterpiece. Like the fact that it does double duty, it's a split card, it does 2 different things, and both it does pretty well.
Agree with that?
Yeah. Honestly, like we got to a point, and this could change, but we got to a point in the meta where you really wanted to start with the green unit so badly, like you might have just been playing him if he was a blank text, to be honest.
Right.
But yes, he's also
Sure.
a General's Blade in space with upside. So like he has an inherent upside. His downside, he has 2 health, right? That's the downside. And if you compare him to other options like Fleet Admiral, he's heroic, right? So you don't get hurt on your Vasibi math or 4 cause, I believe in math.
Yeah, and he's still Rebel, you know, so he Rebel assaults.
Yep, still
You
Rebel.
know, it's interesting. He's actually Force, which, I mean, potentially is interesting for some cards in set 5. So,
Yep.
I think he's the most expensive rare
Force,
from set
but
4.
not a Jedi, so it doesn't hold a General's Blade, unfortunately.
Correct. All right, Sabine's Masterpiece. Great card.
I mean, it's the best card we got in the last set by a mile, I think. It broke open a lot of matchups that we were struggling with early on in the meta. Like Han Green, it's pretty much one of your best cards. Han Yellow, before the DJ ban, this was one of your best cards that we got.
Right.
Opened up brand new lines for us. It's great. Like, just the utility you get from this card is amazing. Specifically with ECL, though, right? It's much worse than a Data Vault deck, as we were talking about. But
Right, because a lot of times with the Han decks, you're talking about using it on turn 2, resource 3 to get a Falcon because you played a green unit.
Yep. Right. Or a red unit. Sometimes you just throw it into it because you don't want them to have a Falcon. Right. And that's important.
Yeah, then it's just an open fire at that point, but you're like, okay, that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Helps
fine.
me stay alive, yeah.
Right. No,
it's an open fire that also has sometimes I'm going to snowball out of control.
Yep.
It's deceptively strong, you know, too. I mean, it's a 3/3.
Yes.
You know, I was not as excited about it when it was released as actually when I started playing with it. But, I mean, once you actually get there, if you have, like, the Sabine and the green unit out and they're not able to handle it, it snowballs in a hurry.
Yep.
Definitely shout out the KTOD Discord for this one popping up. This one, I completely blew my rate. I didn't even see it coming. And then they were just like, no, this card's good. I tested it and it just, obviously changed the deck so much. Now I can't even imagine like us.
Now, are you always putting the experience on the Masterpiece, or are you sometimes putting it elsewhere?
I will throw it around sometimes, but I think 80% of the time it's just going on the Masterpiece, just so I can either do the extra damage to whatever I'm trying to kill or just hit base immediately, as opposed to opening myself up to them being able to answer the experience.
Yeah, you got to be flexible with that. I think a lot of times when you're ECLing it, you are putting the experience on the unit because it's trying to survive that attack. But outside of that, you really have to make smart decisions with it. It's not always the easiest choice.
Yeah, and I think one way to look at it is look how many people are playing like the Eager E, you know, the escort fighter, you know, there, and that's a 4/1, which always dies essentially when it ambushes. I mean, with a green unit out, Sabine's Masterpiece is essentially an ambushing 4/4 with ECL on research 3, so it's way above curve. And then they kind of answer it, or it's going to get worse for them after that. If it gets behind Bright Hope after that, good luck.
Yep.
All right, our boy Chewie. Certainly strong, right? If Chewie sits on something, he's there. Are you always playing with as a pilot? Let me ask you that first.
It's the first option. I definitely want to put him down as a pilot. I'm not afraid to just play a 5-mana 5/6, especially against Kira, just because it's a sturdy body. But being able to really like shore up being able to go tall and protect against power of the dark side is really strong. I know we've talked about the fact that it does get answered by OB, it does get answered by No Glory, but if you get to pop them 2 or 3 times, that's a huge chunk of damage that you put on your base, and you're getting closer to that check that we are just trying earlier. So I can't imagine not playing this right now, especially against Kira, especially into a Kira heavy meta. But I definitely do understand the logic of not wanting to get yourself 2 for 1. It's a tough call.
Yeah, I think early on in the meta, he was extremely good into, like a lot of people playing like the Luke Data Vault decks early,
Right.
the Ray Data Vault decks before they got tuned, Kira, Bosk Blue, like in those matchups, he's excellent. But they did adapt pretty heavily because of what we were doing and what Han Green was doing. We saw a lot of confiscates, a lot of traitorous's in the main deck, a lot of even like disabling Fang Fighters and some other things across other decks just to answer him. So he just became a little risky, but much like Darksaber, sometimes you just resolve him and you just win the game, right? There are certain spots where that's just what he does. Even playing him on the ground for 5 can just be broken.
I don't mind him on the ground for 5 into a blue deck, particularly if it's a blue hero deck, right? Because they can't traitors truly on the ground, right? He's got to be on a ship in order to steal because it costs more than 3.
Right.
All right. And then Phoenix Squadron A-Wing. Why this over the ironically green Squadron A-Ring that's a red card?
Oh, it's not over it. I think it's on top of, in my opinion. It's an addition to. I think this is actually sneakily one of the coolest cards that we got in the last set, in that it allows us to play, instead of having to play the 2/3 X-Wing, right, that we were playing in set 1, sometimes in set 2, just for that added space flexibility, which was kind of bad into a lot of different things, especially with blue leaders running around. Now we have an answer, right? It trades into the blue leaders, which feels great. It wears a wing leader very well. It pushes damage. It's just an excellent 2-drop.
Yeah. Are you ever ECLing this into a win in the mirror?
Yeah, sure. I'm not 100%. In the depends. Yeah. Got to be open
into the red A-Wing.
Yeah, if they play red A-Wing,
green, the named green. Yeah,
you feels pretty good if you answer it into green because you've just taken control of the board, and they got.
That's one thing I think that is like. That's one thing I think is underrated about this card is just the fact that it has the 3 power immediately. It has it on defense too, as opposed to the 1/3, because they can't just ECL their ship into your ship if you lead on this in the mirror. And I think that's a really powerful play. If I have both in my hand, I'm resourcing 1/3 every time. The 2 toughness is a little bit of a liability, but it just doesn't come up in a lot of matchups.
Yeah, not anymore. If we move back to where, like in the Django metas where everyone had daring raids just floating around, it's much more risky. But you don't see that card anywhere right now. If it comes back, yeah, maybe we talk about maybe some adjustments. But right now, he's pretty safe to play.
All right, let's pop into the matchups. This is where we're going to spend the most of it, kind of like we did with the Kira class that we had already done the master class format. But let's talk about the mirror. I mean, you're typically going to have to win some mirrors to win a big event. What are you thinking going into the mirror? Let's start with Will.
So it's always going to depend on who has initiative, because that's really going to define the game. I think it's not critical that you have initiative to win the mirror. You just have to play differently depending on whether you do or don't. I really like, if I don't have initiative, to ECL my turn 1 play into their turn 1 play in the world where mine survives.
Right.
Sometimes the cards don't line up that way. Sometimes they go battlefield marine, which there's nothing you can do about it. At that point, I'm thinking of lane dodging and just trying to see what my cards can do racing wise. And my biggest thing in the mirror is having my ECL lean into killing one of their units and leaving one of mine behind, and then just pour into a sword fight and a rebel assault fight. Who can consolidate their actions the best?
Best card in the mirror is Rebel Assault. True or false?
True.
Yeah.
That's close. Darksaber's real close with Rebel Assault.
I can see that.
Yep.
Having the Darksaber that isn't answered is backbreaking in the mirror.
Oh, absolutely. And you get kind of like this weird thing with like sideboarding and the upgrade removal, right? You know, because
Yes,
if you like blow them out game
100%.
one with Darksaber, you know, you're pretty sure they're going to get the upgrade removal, and maybe you actually take them out, you know, because they're going to, and then they have a bunch of dead cards, and you have, you know, threats. But what are your thoughts on the mirror, Chrono? I'm sure you've played this probably
Thousands and thousands of times. Yeah. You could break it down pretty simply, in my opinion. Like everything Will says is absolutely correct. There are a lot of decisions you have to make. And I think ultimately it really comes down to which it's not always just about initiative. That does play a factor, like Will mentioned,
Right.
but you do want to discern who are you in the matchup, right? And you need to make that decision. Are you the wing leader? Like, just to break it down as simply as possible. Are you the wing leader deck, or are you the one that has to answer the wing leader? Right? That's like cards like Fleet Lieutenant become very important. Wing leader becomes extremely important. Darksaber becomes important. Rebel Assault when you're using the ECL, because there is these lines, right, where you need to set up 2 or 3 turns ahead of time. Am I going to go for the wing leader blowout? Am I going for the early ECL to prevent that? Or do I have the Fleet Lieutenant to punish it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then on top of that, if we both play Darksaber and, you know, we'll use it early ECL, but didn't get a big enough advantage, and I can ECL in my PO, do I just win? Right. Sometimes that's also true. So like there's all these little micro games that you play throughout the matchup. And a lot of it is your resource decision based on where you're fitting in and what strategy you're taking. Because the game's over R5. This game does not go to R6 unless it's game 2 or 3 and we were playing the I confiscate you, you confiscate me. You know, I got Sundari, you have Sundari, and we're just kind of playing a little bit slower than we are. But most of the time it ends on R5. Mm-hmm. So you're making decisions quick, and every decision matters a lot. And I would say the reason why Rebel Assault can be argued to be the best card in the matchup, if you're the deck that draws multiples to your opponent's 0, it becomes very tricky if they're not able to control the board, because it just ends it even quicker. Whoever basically Will Think said it best when he says you want to consolidate your actions, right? You want to do as much damage you can in the smallest amount of actions possible.
So boarding, what are you doing in the mirror? Well, so this is your list.
First thing I'm taking out.
Right.
Yeah. First thing we're taking out is Wreckers. Right. Like Chrono was just saying, we don't want to see 6 resource turn. So those cards are coming out. Then you kind of get into that sub game of how many Darksabers am I taking out? How many Chewbacca's am I taking out? Am I worried about their plan? Do I want to just go wide on them? I definitely want to bring in things like heroic sacks. That's just kind of a way to push extra damage, smaller amounts of things. Sundaris to kind of stretch the game out. You know what I mean? In the times when you can't quite take that, you want to have more options and be able to figure out the game a little bit better. Darksaber is always a tough one. That's why I'm kind of happy that I do have 2, and I can just kind of leave both of them in. Maybe I trim 1. Whereas if I had 3, I would definitely be taking some number out.
All right. Any of the sideboard sage advice, Chrono?
Yeah, Will nailed it. Absolutely correct. I will say, and this is one of the hardest parts of sideboarding in this game in comparison to, say, like Magic or some of the other sideboard-like games. You have to understand how your opponent's playing in that first game. You have to read your opponent. How are they playing this out, right? Do they understand how this matchup plays out? How are they playing it, right? Are they playing it differently than I would, right? Because if I'm playing someone who's playing exactly the way I am, I'm just taking all my Darksabers out, throwing in another 3-drop, throwing in my confiscates, and I'm not even risking it, right? But if I see my opponents playing a little bit strange or missequencing, or maybe not trying to answer me and just trying to just go face and race really hard,
right,
I might second guess that, and maybe I do just force the Darksaber. Like I did that. I had in Minnesota, I had an opponent where I was like, oh, I'm not sure he knows exactly what's going on here. I'm going to leave him in, and it paid off. In game 2, it went the same way as game 1. But I've also had opponents where if I did that, I would have gotten blown out.
Right.
So you have to make that read, and then because you're playing a game of chicken, basically, you're saying, are you leaving them in? Right? Am I leaving him in? What are we doing? Who knows? But like, you have to make that call, and the only way you're going to gauge that is by the initial game and really paying attention.
Absolutely. Great stuff. All right, Quinlan, this is Michael's list, who I think was undefeated till he met you, Will, at Richmond. Why don't we start with Chrono on this one? What are you thinking as you start into Quinlan?
Yeah, so this is tricky. There's one in my opinion, there's the best line to take. But I will tell you that Quinlan does have a way around that, but it is a very specific line they have to take.
Mm-hmm.
What we really want to be doing, we want to start the game with a ping. Right? You want to ping no matter what. They're going to give you initiative. You want to ping. If they spark you, whatever. Who cares? If they pass and you have a 3/5 at hand, you're just claiming. Right? And you're just jamming a 3/5 on the next turn, or a 1/5 if it's Sundari. They do have a way to answer that in a few different ways. Depends how their deck's built, but it makes it much more challenging for them.
You're talking about gorillas?
Yeah, gorillas can be an answer, but there's also the land speeder guy. What's the 2/3 ambusher, right? Because when they do that, then Park in Town, right? Yeah, it's not a perfect answer. None of those are clean answers for your opponent, and it still slows them down, so it's still optimal. But do realize it's not an auto win, depending on how their deck is built. But then there is also for their deck, what they're trying to do is they're trying to control the board, but they do need a unit presence.
Right.
They have to put pressure on you to close the game up before you can get to Wrecker and all your big and your burn and your reach. So they do need to put pressure. So if you're not allowing them to do that and you're still applying pressure that next turn, they only have 25 HP like you can just close out the game pretty quickly.
Yeah, as you know, I've been talking about don't pass twice into Sabine a very, very long time. And I think actually Gorilla sometimes makes it worth it, but really Sabine's endgame is better than Quinlan's. Quinlan gets really strong on the Sabine flip on the Quinlan flip turn on 5, right? So if you can do that, and Surprise Strike is actually the best card in Quinlan's deck, I think, against Sabine, because you can't add 3 damage for 2, early. So if you can pressure Sabine's base enough, she kind of has to ECL, early, and you go from there. Well, it's fresh in my mind because I had my opponent, I'd be a very good Sabine player that's in our Discord at the tournament we played yesterday. If you do, get to the, claim, don't ping starting turn 2. That actually helps Quinlan a lot, nowadays. You play your 5 health unit. Right?
Yes.
All right. Will, you did an excellent job in the final, against a very, very good Quinlan player. What are you thinking into this matchup?
Yeah, I actually played Michael in the Swiss as well. He beat me, obviously, because he was undefeated, but my teammate was standing over my shoulder, was kicking me the entire rest of that in between the round for punching the game away. I think that this has become a very good matchup for Sabine. I'm not sure exactly where it shifted, if it's just the fact that Quinlan has to respect the fact that there's a rest of the meta, but this is just a deck that I feel like we're mostly able to handle with exactly the line that Chrono was just talking about. You start with a ping, they'll pass because they can't play their unit into yours, and then you claim, and now you're just ahead. Your mid game, it may have some hiccups against some of their stuff, but your late game is just so strong. And being able to blow out their flip turns with post wreckers, and you can get really far ahead of them at that point, and then just close out the game without really ever letting their tempo stuff really disrupt.
Yeah, and I think exactly where it changed is, if you look at the right, this has 3 Hans and 2 of the big Falcons and a mace. Those are not great cards against Sabine by any means.
The biggest card you lost was Red 3. Red 3, like early on in Quinlan,
right.
The best lines that Quinlan could take was the best thing they could take is just I'm just gonna play a 2-drop, and I don't care if you ping or pass, whatever, I don't care. And then I'm gonna play a Red 3, and now we're racing, right? And they still get the ping on your 3-drop, and they can do all their target down stuff, and then they'll cure you to take your best card, right? They can play that game.
Yep.
Without that strategy, they can't race fast enough. So they have to play more control-y, and then it snowballs from there.
If Quinlan wants to be Sabine, if you're trying to improve against that, you can go back to that stuff. I mean, I don't know about red 3 just because of the space vulnerability, but I mean, you can still play Wing Leader, you can still play the fleets. I mean, that's going to significantly increase your speed matchup because now you're faster and you can just race most of the time and kill something with Dark in Town. It's really hard for Sabine. But
the way I used to lose this matchup a lot was they would just throw one speed bump in front of you and then just hit the gas.
Yeah.
And you just, that speed bump would jumble you up and like they'd get to the finish line before you. And now they just don't have the ability to do that.
As Quinlan, my favorite lead into Sabine was Jin. Like if you Jin and then Wing Leader on top of that, I mean, you're really kind of making them have to like put a K2 into her or something.
Not to give away some sauce here, but one of the best lines that you can do right now is either Elite or the 2/4 R2 plus Blaster.
Yeah.
If you want to really mess with Sabine and they don't go space, that's like your best route. You can if you want to have that same game where you're putting a speed bump and racing, that's a line for you.
Oh, that's exactly. I like L3 now. I mean, if you don't have Gorilla, you're not doing that thing. L3 into Blaster into Surprise Strike. Right at that point, that's what I'm talking about with make Sabine use ECL because you've done enough damage then that I think that she's not going to get the record.
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
It is hard though now with how much space Sabine can play.
Right.
Like Falcon's nice clean up on the next turn, but you got to have it.
Right. All right. Your teammate Alex, great player. On green. Let's start with Will here because I think you actually played him twice in Swiss and Richmond. Or twice in the tournament, anyway.
Yeah.
What are you looking to do to pilot Han?
Kill the first ship. After that, the game's mostly gravy. I mean, sometimes they can come back from it, but you need to kill that first ship. The game I played him on camera, he goes turn 1 ship, turn 2 ship, and I needed to answer both of those. But you need to keep those ships grounded early. Don't let them start snowballing with pilots. It's like I was saying about the Sabine mirror, it kind of becomes a sword fight. Because Sabine just has so few answers to giant units, it does become a race to get the biggest unit out as quick as possible. And Han has the ability to do that very well. So we need to stop that before it happens. And just kind of like what Quinlan used to do, where we just need to stop them and hit the gas and finish the game before they have the chance to rebuild.
Chrono.
No, that Will nailed it. There is a little sub game here that's very tricky, which is your turn 1 play. Because let's say what you want to be doing is either playing a green unit on the ground is excellent, right? Or a red one if they go Tiny Falcon or Clown Car Falcon, right? That's great. Really bad though if they go Hauler. On the other side, you go the 3/2 A-Wing in space into Fleet Lieutenant into a Hauler, you're feeling great, right? You actually probably auto win that game, but you will lose if they go Falcon off of that. The 3/4 Falcon, right? The fast Falcon. So like, or Blue Leader for that matter. So like, it's tricky. It's really tricky. Like it's all about, you're kind of just not, I don't want to say you're guessing, but you kind of are. You're kind of saying like, well, let's see what ship you have, right? Because like
you're soul reading.
You're soul reading because you got like 1 of 4 ships, right? To start the game. Which one? Which one you got? And then ultimately, I think the actual safest bet, if your opponent knows what's up, this is like your safest bet is actually just to play your 3/2 in space, because then it plays around their 3/2, their A-Wing, it plays around everything except for Fast Falcon.
Right.
So that low, like that's the best odds. But that's your best odds. But like also it's very risky because you probably just auto lose actually if they go Fast Falcon. So it's like, I got auto lose, but it is my best odds because that in a Fleet Lieutenant or an ECL Sabine Masterpiece, like you're covered pretty much.
Fast Falcon's a yellow Falcon for set 1. I think that lingo is catching on all over the place. But it's the 3/4 yellow. Ironically, not the one that ambushes. But all right, the Ray Data Vault. This is the deck that was the best converting deck from Minnesota. Did you have to play this, Chrono, when you were there?
No, but I did play a Yoda Data Vault.
There you go. So what are you doing into kind of like the modern blue-green Data Vault decks? Ray's by far the most played right now.
Yeah, I expect to see a lot of it at Minnesota. That's why I have the Fighters for Freedom in the main, and even 1 Rebel Pathfinder as my 3rd Luke, basically. Really, it's tricky. It's a tricky game because what you want to do is you want to try to do early space a lot of the time if you can, but they are playing in trenches now, right? And other ways to answer it, so it becomes a little bit more challenging to do that. And you're kind of giving up ground. So if they are able to entrench, it's much harder to then come back.
Right.
So you wanted to be prepared to have an answer for the village people, right? So Fighters for Freedom, Rebel Pathfinder, all excellent options. You're really wanting to answer Ray on her flip, right? And so this is actually one of the challenging parts, and something I learned from playing the matchup a bunch is going into the Ray flip turn. You, as the Sabine, want to be ahead on actions. And what I mean by that is you want to have more units than they do, or more options of ways to dirtle than they do. Because what they can do is they can just like play a unit, use Ray's ability, play another unit, play an event, then flip. You're now not going to have an opportunity to get Poe or Wrecker in on that flip to actually disrupt Ray. And like once she's off to the races, it becomes much more challenging to come back. Especially because answering her the next turn, then you're open to Luke, right? Because you kill it with your ECL, great, but then they Luke, and then you're kind of in the same spot. So one of the most challenging things to do in that matchup is be ahead on actions, and the way to do that is just play more units, right? Like you might want to play K2 on flip, but if you have 2/2 drops, it's probably better, right? In some situations. Same thing on R5. You may want to just slam that Poe, right? Just put him out there. But they have a lot of ways to answer that with one action like Fell. So you're probably better off just playing a 3 and a 2. And then just saving him to ECL the next turn. So you're kind of playing that sub game. It's really important.
Yeah. Thoughts, Will?
Yeah, I mean, this is a deck that's got 3 entrenched and 3 traitorous. They're going to punish you for going tall.
Yep.
So going wide is absolutely the plan. We do need to be very aggressive because the Ray flip turn, Luke, like these are units that just restore a lot of health. They already have 33. Like, don't make me do 50.
No, I want to talk
I'm not
about
going to win that game.
So what units do we have to kill? Because I mean, some of the ground units I think need to die here.
There are some games. This is really interesting. I've actually won every game where I've turned one ECL to kill their nice little bounty 2/3.
Dude. Yep, that's one.
Because what can be really tricky is if they play that and you only have ground, and then they put a nice little EXP on that, and it's just killing 2 guys and healing 2. Mm-hmm. You're probably not in a good spot. Yeah, and it feels bad to burn ECL, but sometimes they don't have. They have to just pass there, and then if you use the Sabine unit, you can answer the village person right away. It kind of puts you in a situation where you're feeling good, and you can have control of that early game to the point where you can snowball. I don't really kill Yoda a ton unless they give me the ability to. Like, I'm not like putting 2 units to kill a Yoda, right? But I'll finish it off. Sundari, same thing. Like, I'll finish it off after it's done something. It's going to get at least 1 restore most of the time. And then you have to kill village people, obviously, because it's in the way. Most of the time, if they play a Luke, the game's probably already over, to be honest. You do have to answer that if you can, like Timely Wrecker or whatever, but like, it's really hard to come back from that spot.
If they kill Luke and then he gets to attack the next turn. I mean, sometimes
it's the attack.
You have to.
It's the attack.
Sometimes they kill something.
If you wrecker in for lethal, that actually happens a fair amount.
That's fine. But once they attack with it once, it's tough.
Yeah.
No, good stuff.
If they ever home won you, the games should never get to that spot. But if it does, you probably also just lost. Like if they're just like cycling village people and stuff, like the game's probably already over.
Yeah.
I still have to read home one every time I see it because it's just like I never see that card.
Yeah, they don't live that long, but if they do, it feels bad.
Sure. So, sometimes it's like a desperation.
I just assume it says I win.
Conceded.
Yeah, it's like
like home one out the thing into the board that has lethal, but yeah, no, you should not be there. I mean, I think Ray might be taking that out actually. Is after board, but all right, kind of the new boogeyman, Yoda. Mm-hmm. This is Carlos's list from Minnesota. I think he was the Bubble Boy, which was unfortunate for him, but great deck. Really did well last weekend with PQs for sure. I think Mickey and Jeff won them, right about an hour away from each other with the same 60. What's your thoughts on this matchup, Will?
It's tricky. They have the ability to snowball on us really bad, really fast. It's kind of like what we were describing Quinlan used to being able to do, just that whole, you gotta knock them down once and then just kind of hit the gas. Because if you don't really, I like EC only my turn one chip into their turn one chips.
Right.
I can't snowball the TIE fighters. You know, being able to just kind of control their non-token space units so that doesn't get out of hand. But really, we're just trying to hit the gas on them, not let them get us before we get them.
Chrono?
Yeah. No, Will nailed it. Your best cards are your 2-drop ships, and your Sabine's Masterpiece is probably MVP in this one. Timelies are excellent because really the first 2 or 3 turns you're just trying to control the board. Like that's what you're just trying to do. Keep them off their stuff. And then from there, like what Vader's trying to do is they're trying to play a very tempo-oriented game, right? Where they're trying to do damage to you, make tokens, then they use their disruption, their bounces, their captures, their tap downs. What you want to make them do is you want to make them have to just use their removal and their interaction without being able to further their board.
Right.
So like people can say, oh, no good to be dead's a blowout. Well, it's only a blowout if they also played a bunch of ships and you haven't interacted, right? If you've been interacting and then they have to no good to be dead, well, that guy's going to untap before I'm dead. So that feels fine, right? And pose an MVP if you can slam him on 5 and you're not dead, just because it just pretty much either finishes the game with a huge, massive swing, or it just makes it so you can't deploy Vader, which is pretty good.
Right. And I think this actually might be the one matchup where a red unit to lead into your ECL Masterpiece, because a lot of these decks are doing the double 1-drop now. You know, certainly the bottom list is going there. So if one of their things has 1 health and the other is like the 1/3, you know, the red unit actually lets you kill both and stop the tide generation on turn 2. You know, typically you want the green for the experience.
Yeah, again though, like not always. It depends. Like if you look at these cards, sometimes you want the 4 health, but it's again, you're right. The red one is the most odds to be the most impactful, but there are situations where the green one's better.
Right. All right, Han Vault. This is Maddie actually had a really deep run with this and loves this deck. You know, great player, your teammate. What are you looking into this? This is kind of a cool deck. Does a lot of fun stuff.
Yep. Couple big things you got to be aware of. One, blue leader early. So do keep that in mind, especially when it's on R4 and it's gonna kill your Sabine and live, right? So you have to think through your plays very carefully. What I really try to do in this matchup, I want wing leaders. I want to be able to go tall early if I can. And I do want to try and bait out the blue leader, right? Like I'm not afraid to play my 3/2 in the space because if I really want to play the blue leader early and kill it, that's one less blue leader I got to worry about coming up. Because that is, in my opinion, the most impactful card early. And then also them being able to drop a Poe on R4 can be challenging too. So it's something you got to answer pretty early on. The game's not getting to this big top end, so don't worry about that. Like if it does, you probably lost, right? If they're playing reinforcement walkers and crate dragons and you're not getting them dead there, it's probably over. So the game really is that they'll get to that hammerhead pretty much every game, but that's pretty much where it's been decided either way.
Well,
yeah, General Riken's another card like right at the top that kind of really disrupts a lot of the finishes that I think I'm about to have.
Right.
But like he was saying, it's mostly the same stuff. Blue leaders are crazy impactful cards, but you have to be really careful and play around that. Besides that, they are a red-green hero deck, just like us. So there are vulnerable to swords and leaders, etc. So as long as you just play around what they could have as the answer and try to navigate that, you can really get them dead before they have the chance to set up all the cool stuff that they want to be doing.
Cat, this is Mephisto, Daniel, you know, this list. Did really well at Richmond with Cat, I think, too.
This was my top 8 matchup.
Right. And, you know, you're not really excited seeing Cat Bane as Sabine, typically. across from you. What are you trying to do if you're getting there?
Will, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I actually faced Mephisto in top 8 of Richmond, and it was a incredibly tight matchup. A lot of the same principles that apply to Quinlan apply here because they do have Tarkentown and you have to play around some of that stuff. But they have the ability to punish us a lot harder for passing. They just get to play good units that have a much stronger ability to erase us. You got to play tight and cross your fingers. This is definitely tough. They have a lot of blowouts potential. Going wide is very important. Playing X5s is very important. Just try to have things that can stick around a little bit longer because a lot of your vulnerable stuff can get funkied away or CAD pinged away.
Chrono.
Yeah. Yep. No, Will nailed it. It's very tight. You really have to make sure you're getting every point of damage. I also played in the top 8 of mini, and that was my loss. And game 2, I won game 1. Game 2, I misplayed very poorly. Ran right into a Bosk ambush where I could have played around it better, and it did come down to 2 or 3 damage. And so if I had just done the right move there and maximized my damage, there's a way better opportunity for me to win. But that's just how tight it is. That's how much those 1 or 2 points of damage matter in this matchup. And then Wrecker's MVP here, like almost always, because you're not ECLing early in this matchup. So like you're gonna be Wreckering. So like just please draw Wrecker. I said the game 3 on stream, I'm like, if I just draw Wrecker, I win. And then I have like 3 turns in a row. I'm like, nope, not gonna happen. That's just how it is sometimes, because you got to be able to answer the flip turn cleanly or push that damage at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in the list, Ray had from Minnesota. I mean, it has now there 2 of them too. I mean, sometimes it'll get like the high roll Zuckus and Bosk, on turn 2, and it's very difficult to win that. But
yeah, you can't play around that. Right. Like there's really you can't. So if they have the 2-card combo or 3-card combo in situations, cool. They have it.
Yeah, despite being a very good deck, Sabine has a lot of trouble against almost every deck's not draw. So you can always imagine a hand that beats Sabine, but they don't usually beat Sabine.
All right, Kira, certainly played a lot right now. Shout out to obviously built a monster here. What are you looking to do into Kira? We'll start with Chrono on this one. How do you beat Wu?
Yeah. Well, I played Wu. I played Wu in Swiss. He crushed me, and I'll tell you exactly why. I had space start every time, which is what I want to be doing. But he had his 2-3 every time. So I went my 3-2. He went his 2-3. And the reason that becomes very challenging is I did have wing leader both games, but then you can't wing leader because you wing leader, they just kill the wing leader, and then they power you, and then you just lose. Right. So you have to like completely switch your strategy. But that is your optimal line to start if you got it. And then the biggest thing after that you need to do, because I did beat 3 other Kiras on the day. Like the big thing that you have to do is you have to not only push damage early, but you have to control the Kira flip turn.
Right.
Kira can ramp. There's really 2 iterations of their ramp. There's clean ramp and there's what I call dirty ramp, right? Clean ramp means they like got to 5R without having to spend additional resource. So when they flip Kira, they can OB. And then dirty ramp is they had to pay 1 with Kira to activate the SLT, or they had to play resupply, and now they don't. They're on 5, so they flip, but they don't OB. You got to play those turns out differently. But your biggest thing is how can I cleanly answer Kira here, right? Like I had one game on stream actually where I ECL'd in a Fleet Lieutenant to attack with my Sabine's tie with a red unit out to deal the 1 damage and then the 3 from the Fleet Lieutenant to kill Kira. Like that's not an optimal play, but guess what? I didn't die from OB there. I had more units. I got damage in. Like it was everything you want to do. Sometimes you ECL K2 in, sometimes you heroic sack a unit, sometimes you Fleet Lieutenant a unit. Like you just got to find a way to not get punished by a big early OB.
Basically, any ground unit plus pump, takes care of Kira's for health if you have.
Well, they often have Sentinels though, so that's where like Fighters for Freedom becomes very important. Rebel Pathfinder, like any way to make sure that you still can get in there, because Pike Sentinel's a big deal. They'll play that, or the 3/5 vehicle one that has Sentinel's tough too.
ATRT.
ATRT, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, the 3/5 Sentinel Forge. Will, thoughts on Kira?
Yeah, this is, I mean, the bane of my existence for right now. Not even necessarily because it's the hardest matchup, but it's just it's so mentally taxing. Every game feels like I'm just working so hard, win, lose, or draw. One of my teammates, Nikki, he's won 2 PQs with this. I know Wu and Tatta are real good, but I put him right there with everybody else as far as one of the better Kira players in the world. And I love jamming games with them. That chess match, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of stress.
Yeah, and I think
we definitely have to kill Kira as soon as it flips, just like Chrono was saying.
You got to prevent a big barrage. I think that like what separates the wheat from the chaff with Kira players, right? And Wu is probably the best I've seen at this is when they know to start going for lethal too. Because I mean, nowadays you have an 8 health advantage, for Kira. I mean, you can be playing and then trying to do damage, and like I see Sabine players pinging way after they shouldn't be doing it because the things have turned,
right?
Because they're actually helping Kira more than them because they go aggro and they can. Like the gunship.
Yeah, even games where you can
killing a thing.
Gunship, exactly.
Coming for 5. That's what 20% of your health every time it swings, and there's not a good answer.
Exactly, or they slow you down enough, and then all of a sudden, Maul, tramples over something for several, and then they still have a massive unit that's going to just clock you super fast. They're just not coming back from that.
Yeah,
playing around the early stuff and then not getting the corner turned on you is definitely a thing.
And that's it. Kira doesn't like seeing Sabine either. I think that actually still it's a good matchup. It's just it's not as like Kira ECL versus Sabine ECL from like a couple of sets ago. I felt a lot better as Sabine than I do nowadays looking at the data vault and some of the other changes. All right, last one, hard control. Do either of you have a boss that you had to go through at the events?
No, I don't think you're seeing very much. I'll tell you that from my testing, this is where Chewy's the best. If you can go like ship into Chewy, like let's go down the list of all the cards that become dead now. Like entrenched is like the one answer that I can see up there that they really have until they get to 5R, and that's pretty much it. That's a huge get we got for this matchup in particular.
And remember that like Poe can like kill top targets. I think that comes up. And I see people miss that when they could have attacked.
Right, Hope. Just bouncing your ship that has a top target, or your ground unit that has a top target on it.
Seems Sabine's kind of like the backwards of basically all the mid-range matchups where they need to prevent a death mark. I mean, really it's probably more important to just get that top target off so they don't extend the game to where, they actually start getting into their power cards or get to a blast.
Yep. Yeah, your best card's Poe.
Yep.
But you gotta sometimes, I'm sure Will's run into these situations. Sometimes in this matchup, you gotta do like these really funky Poe ECLs where you're just like, hey, how do I go in and I have to deal with a client and something else, right? And the bounty. Like there's so many weird situations where there's multiple things you got to answer, and you got to make the right decision on how you're going to utilize your ECL to deal with it all. Because you can't go with like client can't live into boss flips turn. Like that just can't happen. Like I don't think you can grind some games out. Like I think at 1 PQ to get into the top 8, I had to deal 67 damage or something crazy to a boss to kill him. I had like 1 card left in deck. That happens, but like you don't want to be in those spots.
Right.
You don't want to be there.
Yeah, and I think Cassian can be good here too. I mean, for what you just talked about, a lot of times
super laser blast deck. Yeah, you want Cassian for sure.
But a lot of times too, like just early, right? I mean, if you have to like pull and use like 3 of your cards, because that kind of happens here, right? Because I mean, sometimes they're low cards.
Exactly.
You actually want to discard them on top of it. I mean, if you can smuggle up the next round, you have something that you don't have to draw dependent, and it actually kind of is like the equivalent of draw a card.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just smuggle in general when you want to be discarding is definitely good.
All right. So those are your matchups. Hopefully this is helpful to everybody there. Any final words of advice for somebody looking at Sabine, at kind of the final days of set 4 or looking into set 5? Let me start with Will. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'd just say mostly like you're an aggro deck, but don't think of yourself just as the beat them down to aggro deck. Like, a lot of your decisions are going to be based on what they're doing more so than just putting yourself out there on the table and seeing how it goes. I think the easiest way to play Sabine poorly is to just think that you need to do as much damage as quickly as possible, and you don't think about your opponent's plays as much as you need to. That's really what separates the difference between, a winning Sabine player and an average Sabine player.
Chrono?
Yep. I think that's great advice. I think sequencing so big, resource decision, all these things are really important in every deck you play in Star Wars Unlimited, no question. I play a lot of decks. One thing I'll say on the Sabine deck is your margins are very thin.
Right.
You do not have a lot of 80-20 matchups. Like, Palp doesn't exist anymore, right? All your matchups are 50-50, maybe even 40-60s. Like, you're in a tough spot a lot of the times, and you have to play really well. You have to maximize your damage. You have to make the right decisions. You do not get to go to late games, right? Late games are not a thing that this deck is doing well. So your decisions early on are extremely important, and they compound upon each other. So it's you got to play tight, and that can be challenging. But you just get practice, and as Will said, got to try to gauge what your opponent's doing, so you can make the right decisions.
All right, so Will, if people want to hear more from you, what do you have going on with Against the Galaxy? You give a shout out to those guys.
We got our podcast Against the Galaxy on YouTube. Look us up. We're on Instagram, Twitter, all the stuff. Pumping out a podcast every week. It's me and some local boys. We're just trying to do the thing. Put a team together and put our brains together. I don't know, trying to help the community as best we can. It's been a really good time. I'm enjoying the ride, even if nobody else is listening. So it's been fun.
And Chrono,
enjoying being part of it.
What's the best place in the world to talk about Green Sabine?
That's the KTOD Discord for sure. That's pretty much the only place you'll find me. I'm there all the time. I'm not into the social media stuff. Feel free to jump in. Feel free to reach out. It's really the only spot I hang out.
Yep, and we'll have links in the description. Thank you guys so much. And to everybody there, if you watch this part, you're my hero. Good luck with Sabine.